Well, good evening, everybody. It's delightful for me to welcome you to this webinar, an evening with the Essex Community Foundation. I'm Nick Alston, and I've got the real privilege, joy and privilege of being the Chair of Trustees at Essex Community Foundation. It's been an extraordinary year, hasn't it? And we were not able to hold our normal AGM at the end of the year, when we always get a lot of people together and talk about the things that we care about, which is the community voluntary sector in Essex and the philanthropy that supports that. We weren't able to have that meeting, so we've done 2 or 3 things to replace it. And this webinar is one of those. We had hoped, and I'm afraid I have some disappointing news right at the start, and that is we'd hoped to welcome Diana Barron, who I've known for some years now, since she was previously Chief Exec of a domestic abuse charity, to speak with us this evening. Unfortunately, some business has had to go to the House of Lords, and as we speak, she's getting ready to speak in the House of Lords. She's asked me to send her really most sincere apologies. She had hoped to be our guest speaker at our AGM, and I know she will make every effort to come and join us at an event next year. So once again, thank you for joining us. This evening, we're going to have a short presentation from Caroline Taylor, the Chief Exec of Essex Community Foundation. And then I'm delighted then to welcome 3 leaders of the community voluntary sector in Essex. Lucy Betley, who runs the Malden CAB, the Citizens Advice Bureau in Malden. And then Vivian Deplesh, who is the Chief Exec of Dementia Adventure, previously involved in other charities in Essex, and also Indy Sandhu, who runs the cultural, the Essex Cultural Diversity Project, Essex Community Diversity Project. And I'm really grateful to Indy, who's the only one of the panelists I don't know, and Indy, I apologize for stumbling over your organization, which has been really important to us this year as we've sought to explore the diversity agenda. Indy's joined us short notice, and we're going to move into a panel discussion, answering hopefully the questions that you will ask us during this evening's session. On your screens, I'm sure many of you have been on webinars before. I noticed there are 80 of us, nearly 80 of us online now, and I'm sure those numbers will increase. If you want to ask a question this evening, I hope you will. The whole point is to give an opportunity for you to ask questions of those who are involved in the community voluntary sector, the leaders in the county. Please do ask questions under the Q&A tab at the bottom. If you move your cursor over that, you'll be able to ask a question, and I'm then going to be prompted, and I will do my best to pick those questions up and feed them into the panel. I hope that is straightforward, and I hope you will want to join in. So once again, a delight for us that you have joined us this evening. Thank you for doing so. A disappointment that Diana Barron is not able to join us. She's, as I say, sends her really sincere apologies. But we've got a great panel, and it's a great opportunity to reflect on what's been, such a demanding year, when I know very well that many organisations who are tackling the immense need around the county have had the most difficult time, but also some rather wonderful stories from the year too. As we then look ahead also to next year, what can we do to make Essex even more successful in identifying and tackling the need? And at the same time, recognising that we could be so much better at what we do, and how we get to that place that we would all want to be. That's enough from me, I'm sure. You'll see Caroline a little bit later, but as I introduce her, she will, I think, go straight to a couple of slides which will just tell the story of Essex Community Foundation during this past year. So without ado, if everything works, I'm going to hand over to Caroline to speak, and then I will come back with you and with her later as we welcome our other guests. Caroline, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nick. It's great to see you, even though I can't, but it's lovely that so many of you are here. I'm just going to quickly run through some of the key highlights that you'll see here on your screen, and these will be made available to you at the end of the evening as well. Of course, as Nick said, it has been an incredibly turbulent year, and really with unprecedented challenges for everybody. And here at the Foundation, we have been working really so very hard to provide timely support to the voluntary community sector in Essex. And I'm just pleased to share some of those findings with you and achievements this evening. I mean, firstly, to say that we've been so very impressed, but not at all surprised, just to see how innovative, responsive and flexible charities have been over the past 9 months, and how they have tackled challenges head on and have found creative ways to continue supporting their beneficiaries throughout what is still an incredibly difficult time. And it's really hard to imagine what our communities would look like now if we didn't have such amazing charities supported by so many wonderful volunteers. And really, I think on behalf of us all at the Foundation, I'd like to extend our sincere appreciation and gratitude to you all. We would not be here if it weren't for your work. This year, charities applied to us for £6.3 million of funding. And although we could not entirely meet this huge demand, in total, we did award £4.8 million of grants, which is a 30% increase on last year and our highest level of giving in our 25-year history. I mean, this increase was largely due to our Essex Coronavirus Response and Recovery Programme, which we launched on the 25th of March, just 2 days after the first lockdown was announced. And we believe that it was the first source of community funding open in Essex. And we knew that we had to respond quickly because charities and grassroots organisations would be turning to us for help. And we had to be able to quickly find a mechanism for distributing emergency funding to meet their needs. So together with our donors, local companies, and in partnership with the National Emergencies Trust, we worked very hard to provide a response that was both meaningful and swift. And so within the first days of lockdown, we were awarding grants of up to £15,000. And in the first 6 weeks, we'd already reached the milestone of awarding £1 million of emergency grants. And throughout that period, we knew that the pandemic was affecting people differently. So we worked closely with the Essex Cultural Diversity Project to extend our reach to the Black, Asian and ethnic communities. And we quickly reached out to all our existing grant partners, relaxing any funding restrictions that might have been in place and offering them as much support as we could in those early stages. As many of you will know, our grant making is made possible because of the many charitable funds that we manage on behalf of a wide range of donors. And this year, 15 new charitable funds were established by local people and companies who want to support their communities in the county. And because we manage so many different charitable funds, our grants are able to support the broadest range of activity. It's a turbulent year for stock markets, kept our Finance and Investment Committee on their toes, but our endowed funds are currently valued at around £43 million. And growing our endowment fund is so important as it enables us to provide a vital source of funding now, but also to support the sector year on year. And this resource will be needed more than ever as we help charities with their recovery over the coming years. Within the year, we were thrilled to launch our community listening project in October, which is helping us to improve our understanding of the communities we support and the people we work with, but the results of which is going to help shape our future work. Our first event, we heard from some of our grant partners who very much shared their concerns around loss of funding, increased demand for their services, as well as developing new ways of delivering service for their beneficiaries. And we know that there have been both challenge and real opportunities for organisations and charities to embrace digital technology and really transform the way they're working. But we also know that charities have been greatly affected, and we've seen a significant rise in demand, particularly in areas such as domestic abuse, which is on the news most evenings, support to very vulnerable children, and of course, food poverty. But also the number of people who are struggling with their mental health and those who live alone and are isolated or were shielding throughout the pandemic. These are all issues that we expect to continue for some time. But we supported some really great projects throughout the pandemic that were helping people to keep active, stay connected, including even in knitting and sewing and craft clubs, gardening projects, allotment schemes, as well as online counselling. And all of that work was made possible by the commitment of voluntary and community organisations and thousands of volunteers who give their time, energy and experience to help others. And as Nick said, we have heard so many wonderful stories. There are far too many to mention here this evening, but please do visit our brand new website. You can also sign up for our regular updates, and you can follow us on social media. We share our stories all the time, and they really are inspiring. I would just like to finish by saying thank you to our donors and supporters, to all of you who work in charities and our volunteers, and in particular to my team who have worked so very hard. And their hard work and dedication is just, it constantly inspires me. We really have achieved a lot for Essex. There is so much more that we need to do, and we're very much looking forward to working with you in the year ahead and hearing from you all your future needs and how we can best support you. Thank you very much, Nick.
Caroline, thank you very much indeed. I'm just looking at the list of participants who've joined us, and as I'm speaking, our other panelists will be coming up on your screens, I hope. Perhaps I could welcome and indeed acknowledge the presence of the Lord Lieutenant with us, Jenny Tolhurst. Jenny, thank you very much indeed for joining. And I see also that the Chairman of the County Council is with us, and it's very good to have you here too. Thank you so much for taking an interest in what we're doing this evening. Now, I think with luck, we're going to find our other panelists joining us, and I'm going to hope that Steve, who put in a very brief appearance during Caroline's presentation, is going to manage that with our cameras coming on. Like magic. Very good. Well, thank you very much. Now, everybody, with luck, you can see all of us. You'll all be in different positions, so I won't try and say it's top left or top right, because I have no idea where on your screens they will be. But can I introduce Lucy Betley, Vivian Deplege, and Indy Sandhu. What I'm going to do is just ask them just to introduce themselves as folk, and also a little bit about their organisation before we get into some questions. Lucy, why don't you kick off?
So hello, I'm Chair of Malden Citizens Advice, one of the 11 Citizens Advice across Essex. We're all independent charities, but working under the umbrella of Citizens Advice nationally. We've got two main aims: one, to help people find a way forward through giving them free confidential advice on all subjects, and that's mostly delivered by highly trained volunteers. And also we campaign to improve the policies and procedures that affect people's lives, and we can do that because of the national spread that we have and the amount of information that we've got coming through.
Fantastic. Lucy, just to give a feel, how many volunteers and people work with you at Malden CAB?
In usual times, upwards of 50 volunteers. We're slightly down on that at the moment, but all through the year we've been busily training new, highly skilled advisors, so we're really ready for when things kick off, even more so next year.
Thank you. And so from local to a national charity, Dementia Adventure. Vivian, great to have you with us.
Hello, Nick. Hello, everybody. Yes, we normally are a national charity, and Dementia Adventure was set up to try and keep people who have been diagnosed with dementia connected with their community and with the outdoors. So in normal circumstances, and I use that word advisedly, we take people on a holiday and give them an experience with their carers and their families. But this year we've actually provided a much more local offer, because obviously the holidays haven't gone ahead because of social distancing restrictions. So we've focused this year on what we can do. So we've had a digital offer of online afternoon teas and morning coffees. We've also provided online support, telephone support for people. And we've started doing out and about, which is outings locally, and most of those, because we are based in Essex, have actually taken place in Essex. So we're continuing to try and connect people with their communities and with them their own sense of self. But it's very difficult to be running a charity where our messages get outdoors and the government messages has been stay inside. So we've done the best we can to keep people connected. And at the beginning of the lockdown in March, one of our beneficiaries who I was talking to said, now everyone's going to get a taste of what it's like to have dementia. You don't know what day of the week it is, and you don't know where you are. So in some ways they felt a bit leveled out rather than excluded. So an interesting perspective on that.
Really interesting, really interesting. Thank you. Thanks very much. Indy, again, great to see you, and thanks for joining. Tell us a little bit about the Cultural Diversity Project.
So I'm the creative director for the Essex Cultural Diversity Project, and we work with a range of diverse communities in Essex. And through partnership working with the Essex Community Foundation, this year we've actually helped to distribute funds through the Emergency Response Fund. And we're working with a number of projects throughout Essex, including Southend, Thurrock, and Essex itself.
I'm really grateful to you for, I'd say, really helping us. It's an area we haven't found easy, and we may have been a bit slow off the mark, if I was being really honest, I think, in terms of the Community Foundation, in really trying to think hard about diversity. And I think at the moment we are bending our minds to how do we remove some of those barriers when it comes to diversity, and how do we not only remove barriers, but then how do we understand how to reach, the many groups who we haven't got enough contact with. So thank you for helping us this year with that. So to get the discussion going, just to remind everybody, I do hope you will ask some questions. Go to the Q&A tab at the bottom if you'd like to, but don't worry, we've got lots up our sleeve, as it were. And there is a lot to talk about. Lucy, I thought I might come to you first, because I think should always be thinking chiefly and firstly about those we serve, our beneficiaries. And my guess is at CAB, you probably see people in need across a really wide spectrum of need. And I'm wondering how the past year has been. I know you've got a lot of experience, how this last year has compared with previous years. What's it been like to be in that position of need, which probably few of us on this call probably can really relate to?
It's been really interesting seeing the range of things that are coming through to us. They are in similar sort of numbers as last year, so just as many people coming for advice, but they're younger people who are coming through, because there are a lot of people who were happily getting along with their lives, doing a job, and then everything went upside down. So it was all very new, a lot of the problems to people. And I'm just glad that actually they thought of going to Citizens Advice and knew that that was somewhere that they could turn to. So hugely more inquiries about employment, obviously, but then of course that has all the associated problems, like how are you going to manage your finances, how are you going to service the debts that you've got, and you're probably very unfamiliar with the benefit system. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, and housing, of course. There's been an increase as well as employment. There's been an increase sadly, in separation issues. There's a lot of family and relationship queries coming in all the time at the moment. Some things we're seeing much less of, and you'd be probably surprised that we're not seeing so many people in debt at the moment. And that is because of all the government schemes that are put in place. Some things are being very much put on hold. So, for example, there isn't the creditor action going on, and a lot of people come to us when there's a bailiff actually at the door, and that's all been put on hold. So the Money and Pensions Service, for example, are expecting an increase of 60% in the amount of debt advice that's going to be needed next year. So we're busily training people to cope with that sort of increase in demand. But at the moment, it's not happening. So there's a lot bubbling away under the surface. So also, like with this stay that there is on evictions, people are in rented accommodation, they're safe at the moment, but they are racking up some quite significant rent arrears.
Is there a standout issue? It sounds as if it might be in the finance area.
Probably not. And it varies from week to week. You know, one week it will all be redundancy, and another week it will be this more of the same. So it does very much go in waves. and very often just triggered by the latest announcement from Boris, whatever it was the day before. So it does change quite a bit.
Mm. Thanks for that. I mentioned we've got all the people, and there's some wonderful questions coming through, and I'm so pleased that Julie Fosh, our High Sheriff, is on as well. Julie, I'm sorry, I should have greeted you earlier, but she's actually, Vivian, she's asked a question specifically about dementia, which is really interesting. She's saying, you know, what might the next steps be in dementia management? I mean, you talked about technology, you know, post-COVID, this is a really tough question, but, you know, is there more to go with technology? She's talking about virtual reality, robotics, and also intergenerational projects. We're seeing there's a wonderful project, wasn't there, in Malden, involving young people and schools and the elderly. I wonder where we're going next in dementia. Have you got ideas on that?
Yes, I think that we are going to see an increase in technology, in people being able to access services through Zoom calls. And of course, you're dealing with a client group for whom this technology might not be their normal way of working. But we've seen an incredible amount of people really wanting to engage with interactive technology. And we're working with an agency based in Belfast who can provide a 16-inch screen, which literally just connects people with very simple buttons to Zoom calls. It reminds people to take medication, and it's that next step which keeps people safe at home. And they're producing this product and, you know, hardware and software at a very affordable rate for both local authorities and charities to support people with doing that. The challenge for technology for someone with living dementia is that sort of sensory impairment, which means they can't determine the difference between a screen and somebody really there. So we have to use it very carefully so that we don't confuse people. I think the other thing that has been developed by Dementia Adventure, but by others, is the use of improved training through technology. And we've been able to deliver training courses by Zoom, which have reached nationally over 2,000 people who are caring for their family and for other organisations. And so, yes, we are going to see an increase in reaching people, scanning people, keeping in touch with them by technology as that develops. But it can never replace that contact that all of us need. And I think we're all suffering from Zoom overload. And so very carefully and cautiously, as social distancing permits us, we're still trying to find ways that people can connect and physically get outdoors. Again, it's maybe helping people to connect with local support rather than travelling distances. One of the biggest challenges for people living with dementia are the effects of living in a care environment, and some of the care home providers have been seriously impacted by both the disease itself and the social distancing restrictions. And so we're providing support of how to keep people engaged when they cannot actually go out and meet people. So I think we are going to see a very great change in how people with dementia are cared for going forward. And even care homes have had to consider the design, the architectural design of their buildings to see if that's a good way of managing people in this situation. There was another question which did say about the silver linings. And I'd just like to say that possibly we've made greater strides, not just in my own charity, but in the charities that are supported by Essex Community Foundation. I'm on the grant committee. So I'm seeing applications coming in from charities across Essex, and people are making changes now that would have taken 2 or 3 years to get in place, with cultural change, with technology change. And so those are the things we hope we'll never turn back from. So we're never going to take away that human contact, which everybody needs. But the bit we can do through technology, we're all advancing fairly quickly on that.
I thought we might struggle for questions and be able to throw the discussion around among us, but in fact there's so many questions coming through. I'm just going to go with the questions that are coming in. And Indy, there's one that's very obviously, that I say obviously, but it goes straight to you first, which is, again, thinking about our beneficiaries, those we serve and look after. What are the issues facing our BAME group? I'm not fond of BAME, but our Black and minority ethnic groups. What are the issues particularly facing those that you've confronted this year?
So the major factors have been actually with the diverse communities in Essex has been actually accessing the funding, so not knowing where to go, which organisations to apply to. And that's where we actually joined forces with the Essex Community Foundation to provide that sector support in terms of reaching these communities. And this was the key challenge for most of the organisations that were facing real hardships in terms of organisations delivering services to their communities. And then we actually worked together to devise a program and an application form that was quite simple, because obviously language barriers play a key factor in this as well. And so we really simplified the process in terms of them to actually apply for the emergency funding. And that was across to other applications and funding processes as well.
And there's another question to follow up on that, perhaps a little bit, which is about whether you feel there's more that we could do, all of us do, to I know your project in particular has been about arts and heritage, but is there more that we could do to be more proactive in improving diversity and in employment and volunteering in the county? You know, volunteering has got such a white middle class, slightly retired sort of feel to it, hasn't it? That's so much of it, but it could be so different. Is there more that we could and should be doing to reach different, more diverse groups when it comes to volunteering?
Yes, definitely. I think it needs to be highlighted in terms of what are the benefits of volunteering as well. So the BAME communities, diverse communities of Essex, can actually see the benefits and provide their services to many organisations, and also maybe through webinars and training sessions, how volunteers can actually enroll into programs. And this is something that's never really supported within the diverse communities in Essex. So through, I think, the work that we're also already started with the Essex Community Foundation, we could actually start implementing that and getting organisations to start building a pool of volunteers from the diverse communities, definitely.
Yeah, there are 2 or 3 questions that have come in, moving on a little bit, which is about sort of joining up some of our work. There's clearly during this year, there have been people moving on all sorts of fronts. Councils have been moving, national government's been moving, local councils have been moving, charities have been moving. How do we make sure all of this work is joined up? I'm wondering if we're have we done it? I might bring Caroline in actually, because I know she keeps a really careful eye on this. But are we doing enough in the county, and could we do more? And what ideas have we got for making sure that all of our efforts push in the same direction, that we don't duplicate, and that we avoid overloading one area with effort and neglecting others?
Well, it's a tough question, because Essex is such a large county, with 12 districts and three top-tier local authorities, a number of CCGs. The Community Foundation is still only a small team, but we work very hard to try and engage with partners across the county. We were, to begin at the start of this pandemic, for example, we were a regular participant at the local resilience forum that was chaired by the Chief Constable, and I know he's on the call this evening. And that was looking at how to coordinate efforts across the county. We have contacts at the county council and district authorities as well. So we very much try to coordinate how we give our money away. But I think part of the challenge through the pandemic was we were working very quickly. And we needed and wanted to work very quickly. And so actually a lot of the organizations that we supported in those first few weeks were organizations that we knew well, we knew what they were doing, and that we knew that they could hit the ground running. But that being said, we had regular conversations with Ruth Stevens from National Lottery Community Fund, and from our contacts that manage funds within the local authorities as well. So we do our very best, and we publicize our grants through a platform called 360 Giving. So we're very transparent about the decisions we make. But I think in a crisis, it can be quite challenging to really coordinate efforts. But I think as long as we're sharing what we were doing, and we did so through the Resilience Forum, and we are making different organizations aware of the decisions we're making, then we really do try to be as transparent as we possibly can with how we give money away.
Lucy, I wonder how it's felt I was going to say at the coalface. You know what I mean? You must, I'm sure you're always looking for funding, and I know CAB's had quite a difficult time, hasn't it, funding in recent years with different streams. Has it felt joined up, or does it feel very just disjointed?
Well, it's different for each Citizens Advice. They all have different relationships with their local authorities. We have a good relationship with the National Lottery, but for example, their focus has now been on this short-term crisis funding for COVID, whereas they're not actually moving forward with their normal stream of funding, which is what we're interested in, because we're not interested in what's happening in the next few weeks. We're interested in what's happening 5 years down the line. So we're very keen to see funders actually take a step back, not be just thinking about the crisis really, and thinking about what really helps people in the long term. All the food banks and everything like that, they have a place. It's great that people are wanting to help in that sort of way, but that's not actually addressing an underlying problem. So I think from a personal point of view, I think it's time for funders to be just perhaps slowing down really about what they're giving money out to, and just really thinking about it and making some sort of bigger commitments for the longer term and moving on. But just talking about the working together bit that you were mentioning, I think this crisis has actually been really good in terms of working together. So this is just a local example of Malden, but I would say that the way that all the different charities and community groups within the district has changed enormously over the last year. So with the CVS and us, Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service, all the different churches, Home Start, although we've always known about each other and have done little projects together, it has really changed the way that we understand what each other are doing and are referring families between us all, obviously in a proper way, but really it's much better, and I expect that that's actually reflected throughout the county.
That's a really, so if we're looking for silver linings, it's always good, isn't it, to do that? You know, the use of technology, the rate of change of managing new projects, partnership working, they're three very strong positives, aren't they, that we can take from this difficult year. Vivian, I was going to ask you, are you keen on us slowing down funding?
Well, I'd like to give the perspective both from my own charity and also from the role I hold for Essex Community Foundation on the Thriving Third Sector. And on that role, on the Thriving Third Sector panel, we are distributing money that is from the funding from the Essex County Council from some years ago. And we have decided that we're going to really look at how we provide support for people who are digitalising their service next year. Because we've recognised that no matter what happens, and we are all not sure of the speed of change of going back to seeing everybody, that we're focusing that funding pot on organisations who really want to change the way they provide services in a digital fashion. And that doesn't mean turning everyone to robots. And I pick up something that someone responded to my comment about going to technology, but it means that if we let technology do the stuff that doesn't have to be done face-to-face, that releases the charities to keep their services for face-to-face activity. So on that hand, I'm really pleased that Essex Community Foundation have already decided what's the way to make the third sector sustainable in the future. And so that's one of those offers. And for my own charity, we're really fortunate to be supported by the People's Postcode Lottery, which isn't the big lottery, but it's another style. And they've actually given our funding for next year based on the opportunity to really rethink what we do, because they have recognised that group holidays might not be a way forward for some time to come. And even when social distancing is relaxed, I've got a very great concern about the confidence of people living with dementia and any mental health condition and any disability, of how people will feel about coming back out, having been inside for so long. I spoke to a man in Sheffield just a week ago saying he'd been out of his house 4 times since March. And the longer he stays in, the longer he feels comfortable there and doesn't want to go out. So I'm very grateful for PPL to saying that we can really use our money next year just to rethink how do we still keep people connected, and change our model. And I think that's the best thing that funders can do in 2021, is just think, what do you need to change, as opposed to just, as Lucy said, funding the emergency and the immediate response. We've got to really start thinking about recovery and what does our sector look like as we come out of this into a brave new world. If anyone wants to be really frightened, there's a film called Songbird, which has been released nationally, and it's a film based on what life would look like if we were 4 years in lockdown. So I went to see that last night at the Curzon, taking advantage of living in a tier 2 town at the moment. But I'd recommend anyone goes to look at that, just to think, have a view of what it might look like if lockdown carries on much further.
Or a Songbird on at the Curzon.
Yes.
Vivian, thank you. India, I wonder, in the terms of looking at those silver linings, have you found, we talked about 2 or 3, have there been other things that you've seen from this year of really quite profound change, things that have, doors that have opened for you and those you support?
Definitely. I think there have been actually the gateways have opened in terms of funders and funding streams available to the diverse communities. I think funders are making more of a approach to the communities to actually apply for funding. But also, it's not just about funding, it's also about upskilling people as well, and providing that sector support where organizations, especially from diverse communities who are really struggling in terms of governance and making their organizations more resilient, I think that also needs to be changed as well. So it's not just about funding in terms of, but also developing the organizations and the people around it and the communities they're serving. I think that needs to be really implemented over the next few months and over the years as well.
Obviously, I say obviously, but at the Essex Community Foundation, our ambition is to encourage and build philanthropy. It is wonderful, as Caroline said, the number of new funds that have been opened this year. I won't remember the exact number. We're around about 150 funds that we manage, 160 funds, something like that. And so growing by a really big, decent number. I think it must be about 10% we've grown over the last year alone. Philanthropy's got such a role to play. It's a joyous thing to be involved in. But there's also the statutory sector to it. Is one of the questions I would have put to Baroness Brown, to Diana if she was here, is should the statutory sector be doing more? I wonder if between us we could just toss that question around a little bit, whether it's the county council or national government. There's probably a downside to getting statutory organisations involved in funding. There tend to be quite a lot of strings attached and lots of proper scrutiny, of course. I'm not saying it shouldn't be proper, but the role of philanthropy can free some of that. I think our giving can be perhaps more open, not necessarily completely open, but I wonder how we feel about that. Lucy, are you always looking for more money from government? Do you think government should be doing more, or should it be down to us?
I mean, it has to be down to a mix, doesn't it? I think really there are certain services that absolutely make sense for the county council or local councils to be supporting. But I think it has to be a sort of an even spread in order to be healthy, I think. And you're never going to get enough from one or the other. And it's safer. It's like anything, isn't it? The more you're spread, the better resilience there is for when things go badly wrong. So when your local councils or whatever have much less money to give out, that's not who you're wholly reliant upon, but yet they have a very important place in the support that they can give to local organisations. So I think it's unrealistic to think that charities are going to get much more statutory funding coming through, and that we should be grateful for that which we can go on getting them to give us, because obviously a lot of what all our organisations do actually saves them money in the long term. We're all incredibly good value for what we do, and very often they do recognise that we provide services that they need and they couldn't possibly afford to provide themselves. So it absolutely makes sense for them to invest in it. But that's probably as much as I'm going to do.
But Vivian, you've got a lot of experience of working in areas where you've been dependent both on well, you've drawn in funding from local authorities from organisations like the Community Foundation. You know, it's that complementarity, isn't it? And for an organisation like us in Essex Community Foundation, how do we make sure that you know that what we're offering is truly beneficial, is in the right place? Is it kind of always obvious?
It's not always obvious, and there can be some duplication of services, which no one wants, because that can waste resources. And I have worked in organisations where the same person is probably getting lots of support from several agencies, which doesn't need to happen. I think that's tightened up a little bit now. But in terms of running charities as a chief executive, I always like to have a three-legged stool, because that's quite balanced, and therefore that three-legged stool is statutory income, philanthropy, and actual individual donors giving us money, and that's the three different forms. And any charity should really be setting its stall out on that sort of basis. If you have one statutory fund which overrides everything else, if that changes, you really are in trouble. But I also think that there probably are better conversations to be had between the statutory money and the voluntary sector grants. And I'm really pleased that the lottery fund often organise local surgeries, so that maybe 3 or 4 funders get together and look at projects. And some of that is statutory money and some of it is grant money. And they really think, well, what could we fund and what could others fund? And I would hope that moving forward, there might be more of those sort of panel arrangements. And I know that Caroline does arrange those conversations between the CCGs, the local authority, and the grant givers. But recently I was talking to an Essex County councillor, and she was explaining, sadly, the increase in suicides in Essex since March. And I was particularly saddened to hear that a lot of them are in Colchester, which is the town where I live. And what was sad is that some of those people weren't even known to the statutory sector. So I think that that's a good example of how the statutory sector are doing all they can in providing mental health support and diagnosis and offers for medication and all those other things. But there's a whole massive informal support that needs to be developed in the form of, connections, cafes, catching up with people, that the voluntary sector is best placed to do. So I would say going forward that everything has to be this sort of hand-in-hand approach, that the statutory sector do what they can, but the philanthropic grant givers also think, well, where are the gaps and how can we fill those in? So I would love to see going forward more informal ways of people having mental health support that doesn't look like a doctor's appointment and doesn't look like an assessment, but just is somebody saying, how are you? How are you getting on? And that sort of, which the voluntary sector is so good at. And that's where I think the two could complement each other. And probably, Lucy, you're seeing lots of people who just need someone to chat to and offload.
Oh, indeed.
That
sort of the talk about the mental health thing, just before lockdown happened, we were just about to start on a really good project with a CCG and Essex County Council, which is providing our advice but within doctors' surgeries, and that was particularly for the sort of people who perhaps wouldn't have wouldn't feel comfortable going out to a citizen's advice, but they're comfortable in their doctor's surgeries, so that they would see one of us in there. And that was about to start, and it certainly will start again as soon as they've stopped filling them up, with vaccination centres and everything like that. But that sort of thing, if that could happen county-wide, I think that would be a really great thing to do and would help.
I think I want to bring Caroline in on the question of philanthropy, because I mean it's been your professional life is encouraging philanthropy, and I know many of our funded holders are on the call, and perhaps on behalf of everybody, I could thank all of them for their ongoing support. They've been magnificent this year in responding to asks from us. But Caroline, the role of philanthropy, it does strike me that, and I've seen it, it's filling those gaps. We all understand about the statutory, both the challenges and the success of the statutory sector, but the gaps and the extras that philanthropy can deliver.
Well, I think that's right. And I echo Lucy's earlier comment that it's a mix. I think in our experience working with philanthropists in particular, they have a greater appetite for risk. And so actually are much more open to trying things and failing. And I think that's the great thing about a community foundation. You can try different projects and you can succeed or fail. And as Vivian mentioned, the Thriving Third Sector Fund is a really brilliant example of how it takes risks, and grant funding should take risks. It should support innovation. It should try different things because we are able to do that. And I think what's been very challenging in recent years is then how you find something that's successful and you can fund support projects that work, and then how you may try then to continue funding. Grant funding can't often continue on an ongoing basis. And the state support to the voluntary sector has changed significantly over recent years. And whereas there was a mix of commissioning and grant funding to the voluntary sector, it's very much more dominated by commissioning contracts now. And considering that the vast majority of charitable and voluntary community organisations in the UK are very small, have absolutely no chance. And I'm sure Indy will have really good examples of very small organisations who wouldn't even get near to commissioning contracts. They are going to rely on voluntary income, and they're going to rely on support from philanthropists and trusts and foundations. So for the charity sector, generating funds for itself so that it can support itself, which is what the Community Foundation does, provides a really vital element of the mix into income into the voluntary community sector.
Before time just rushes by, doesn't it? I can't believe how fast this time's gone. Before I want to look ahead for 10 minutes to think about, recovery from where we are now, because it's terribly important. Before we do that, I have a concern about about our people, as it were, the people who your volunteers, your own staff. We talked about beneficiaries, but are we looking after our own people enough? It's been a really tough time, hasn't it? I think most people work in the areas you will work in out of a passion for helping people. Are we looking after our people? Indy, those you work with and those who are running the number of projects you're involved with, are they looking after themselves at this difficult time?
Yes, definitely. I think the diverse communities themselves have really, in terms of supporting their own networks as well and their communities. For example, the Sikh temple in Grays in Thurrock, they've been distributing food to the community from their communal kitchen. The local mosque has been helping out as well in Essex. And I think communities are becoming more resilient and supporting each other and their networks and their communities. So I think it's been a joint effort over the last 10 months. It's been very hard and it's been a challenge, but I think the sector has really changed in terms of community giving and community support.
That's great. That's great to hear. And Lucy, with your teams, have you must worry about the pressure on those who are working and looking after those who are not?
I do. I think most of them have actually been, and I would include myself in this, just incredibly grateful to have something to do that is actually really worthwhile. And when everything else is very uncertain, I think that is hugely helpful. So that got us through that sort of initial buzz to start with, and all the changes to how we work and all that sort of thing, when it's all quite, I mean, I know it's in a ghastly way, but it was quite exciting in a way. So that, I think people felt good about having something really good to do. And I think that has really helped us through the year, but it's very much worn off. They're still pleased to be working, but they are increasingly struggling with the lack of the sort of camaraderie and the team of being in the office together, which is a very much a sort of very family buzzy atmosphere that we have. And I'm sorry, but anything that is remote does not make up for it. And so they miss that, and that's hard. And I think as a national organisation, there's been a lot of guidance, a lot of help put on, for people to have help, and lots of sort of sessions designed to help you deal with it. So as a national organisation, they are aware of people and how it's struggling. But I think it is hard. And also this sort of working from home business, which for most of us, it is not a good thing. It might be on the odd day, but as a normal thing, it's very difficult. And that sort of merging of home life, work life, what are you doing? And it's not good. And I think we've all learnt that it isn't good. So I think that trying to keep people infused, engaged, feeling good about themselves is hugely important. And it's a really, really big part of my role, is looking after my staff and volunteers just as much as actually doing the work that we do.
Thank you. Let's look ahead. There are going to be huge challenges, aren't there, in recovery, but there are opportunities too. I'm wondering, I'll come to each of you in turn, perhaps just to say what you might, what we can do better, or what you would most like from the community foundations as we look ahead. And I'm wondering if we can weave in some other thoughts too. I'm concerned about, if we've learned a lot about this year, it's not just about coronavirus, is it? Look at the environment, look at all of the issues about sustainability. We've talked about diversity. How can we kind of rewire some of our work to make some of these things, holistic is that a great word to use here, but more encompassing of all of the challenges we face, inequality, our environment, and perhaps linking that not only what we can do as philanthropists, but also, and the Lord Lieutenant's raised with me, Jenny said, there are businesses out there who would be keen to help us and work with us, not just giving us money, but sharing that expertise. What are the opportunities as we look ahead for recovery from coronavirus? I wonder who wants to have a go first. Vivian, you're great at fast balls coming down the track.
That's okay, because I'm ready for this, and my answer is even ball-shaped in the answer, because I've recommended a film and I'm now recommending a book which is called Donut Economics, which has been recently produced, and I think Caroline might have read it. And it really is showing how we are using our resources, locally, nationally, globally, in a way that is not sustainable. So we've still got a whole bunch of people who aren't living a healthy and productive and good life. And then we've got a planet that is creaking at the seams in terms of our use of resources. And so therefore the coronavirus has made us all think on a small scale how we do things differently. And that might be whether we shop locally, whether we travel to work, and all those sort of things. So I think that it is an opportunity for all of us to really consider how we use our resources. Just because we can, does that mean we should? And sort of thinking like that will make people, think about their local community, think about how they're using resources. So if I can't answer the question totally, at least I recommend everyone to read a book that could make them think differently. But looking ahead, this whole pandemic is a global pandemic, isn't it? And it shows how we all affect each other across the globe by our small actions. So if I've always said that people either think they can do nothing or do everything, but actually this is more time than ever is to think, what can I do personally to commit to my community, whether that's volunteering or financially, and how can I even change some of my behaviours in terms of reusable coffee cups or something like that. And I'm not being flippant by that, but this is how small changes will affect global changes, really.
Indy, how does it look to you? What could we do at the foundation better in your space?
So I think the pandemic has actually given new opportunities to people and communities as well. So connecting through digital platforms, through Zoom, and also actually giving them that experience of applying for funding and making their organizations more resilient. And I think the Essex Community Foundation have really supported that, and their swift and professional approach during the pandemic and the emergency response fund was phenomenal. Honestly, it really reached out to these communities through the Essex Cultural Diversity Project. We quickly acted on that, and we distributed all these funds. And I think going forward, the Essex Community Foundation can really work with some of these organisations in the future to support them, not just through the emergency response fund, but also through your other funding opportunities as well, and other funds that you distribute.
And this, the thought about businesses being able to offer mentoring and support for groups, is that something that's attractive? That groups might welcome that sort of the input from successful businesses who may have an interest in supporting groups in their area. Perhaps it happens. Perhaps you're aware of it.
Yes, definitely. I mean, shopping centres, the high street is changing all the time. There's so many empty shops now that can be utilised and used for different purposes, not just for arts galleries or venues, but also we can use them for community spaces as well. So I think there was a discussion last week. We had a conference and we were talking about this, and with many diverse communities that were saying that we need the space, we need venues, and that's something businesses are reaching out to communities and saying, look, come and use our spaces, because obviously there's a big shift in the high street and shopping centres that we can utilise these spaces. So it's just one example of how business can support communities.
Lucy looks as if she's getting ready to run out of the door.
I'm moving away from the grandfather clock that's about to chime 6 o'clock.
Well, it's a good clue, because I think at that stage we had promised that we were aiming to finish at 6. But Lucy, the recovery period from your perspective, what would you like to see us doing more of or better? And this, is it just a dream to think that we could bring some of these thoughts together in terms of the environment and sustainability and diversity, and making sure that we really do join up a bit more creatively?
Well, I mean, I think you are doing it amazingly well already. And the fact that the way that you sort of keep your philanthropists talking to each other, and you give people from the different charities the opportunity to mix with them at your events and things, means that I think the Community Foundation is a really big influence on that, and the way that we all understand each other. So I think it's already doing a lot of really good work there.
Thank you for that. It's a great note to finish on. But I think we are almost out of time, aren't we? And I think we did promise. I'm not going to look to Caroline to nod at me. I think we did promise that we'd finish at 6. I think people will move on. This discussion could go on, couldn't it, with ease for another hour. We've barely scratched the surface, but I think we've touched on some really important issues. From my perspective, I've had the privilege of seeing so many fantastic groups across Essex, from the smallest to some very large organisations, work in very difficult circumstances so creatively during the course of this year. And I'd just say to all of you who are involved in that, hands-on, we've got so much to be grateful to you for. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for the care you show to your teams. Caroline, perhaps I could say personally to you, for the Essex Community Foundation team, I know how hard they've worked, but I'm sure that's replicated in all of the charities. It's amazing work. There's always more to be done. I think our joining up with the statutory sector is terribly important. I was going to go round with perhaps for the last minute, if I'm going to, and I've just seen a wonderful note from the Chief Constable from BJ saying Happy Christmas to everybody. BJ, thank you for the support you consistently give us. But if I was going to take one quick message back to Diana Barron, and I'll report back on this evening, and I've had such an upbeat message. I know it's been tough for everybody, but there's such an upbeat feel about how we've come through this. And I'm conflicted by that, because I know just how terribly difficult it is at the sharp end for lots of people, and lots of organisations in real severe financial difficulty, but so many good things too. If I was going to go back with Diana with an ask or something from you, I wonder what it would be. Caroline, you can go first.
I would say really listen to what the voluntary community sector is telling you, and I think be prepared to take risks and be open.
Okay, listen, take risk, and
with an open mind.
Vivian?
Please provide funding for informal, accessible mental health support, and that will have an impact on a whole range of other social issues if we can get some mental health support fairly early on, in simple ways, and that will be solve the problem.
Well
can I add another one, just cheekily and quickly?
No. All right, really quick.
Release dormant assets to community foundations. We can spend that money well in the community.
Indeed. You want to have a go?
I think probably be more creative in terms of funding streams, and see how organisations can join up together, like the Arts Council have just joined up with the Arts and Health Services to provide how the arts can make an impact. So just being creative.
Fantastic. Lucy, last word.
I suppose the government has made some good gestures sort of early on in the pandemic about slightly raising people's incomes with like the local housing allowance, like the increase of the standard person's allowance for income support. I mean, from Universal Credit. And those have been really good and have given people just that little bit more money. And I just very much hope that those aren't going to be taken away again. They're supposed to be coming to an end in the spring, but we realise through this that this pandemic has affected people at the lower end of the income bracket so much more than everybody else. And to make that worse again would be really sad. And so I would encourage the government to think again about not making it even worse than it is from that point of view.
Thank you so much. Thank you, every one of our panelists. Indy, great to meet you. I'm sorry we haven't.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Lucy, lovely to see you again, and thank you very much. Vivian, and I should have said at the beginning, Vivian is also one of the trustees of Essex Community Foundation, one of 3 charity CEOs we've got on our board now, which is a great joy to me. Thank you for all that you give. Caroline, thank you and the team for organising it all.
Thank you.
But the biggest thanks really to everybody who's dialed in. Thank you. As you leave us, you'll go to a screen which has got some I think probably it's got some of Caroline's data there, and it's got pointers to the web pages and the home sites of all of the organisations that have contributed tonight. And I hope you'll just dwell on that for a moment. Do please keep in contact. Thank you to all our beneficiaries. And I'm just reading the message at the side of the screen. It's very distracting. People have obviously enjoyed tonight. I wish everybody, the happiest Christmas possible in these very difficult circumstances. And we'll look forward to meeting up with you again next year in whatever way we're able to. Thank you all very much indeed. Thanks. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.